Hello, my name is Taylor Guthrie, and I will be talking about how we have used a round-robin design in order to explore interpersonal perception and how our social relationship with our group members modulates how these processes unfold in certain brain regions involved in social cognition. And so we collected 20 groups of 5 or 6 individuals. There was 114 subjects in total. And this was a full round robin design. So every single one of these people was a part of the study. They each came in for a behavioral session where they filled out a series of personality ratings about each of their group members. But more importantly for this analysis, filled out a series of social relationship measures. So how good they were friends with each of these other people, how well they knew them, how much they liked each of these other group members, and how similar they thought they were to them. And then each person also came in for an MRI session where they completed a trait adjective task. So they saw either the word self or the name of one of their prospective group members at the top of the screen. And below that was some type of a trait word. And they were told to say yes or no, whether that trait word was descriptive of the particular target that was listed at the top of the screen. And we were less interested in whether they were endorsing a particular trait for a specific target and more interested in the fact that this was encouraging some type of interpersonal cognitive process. We were getting each of these people to think about their group members in a meaningful way. And so for the analysis, we first subdivided the MNI standard brain down into 100 bilateral parcels. This was a neurosynth parcellation scheme that was based on meta-analytic coactivation across a series of studies. And then we looked across our study at all of the cases of target congruence, or cases where we had 2 perceivers thinking about the same target or the same group member. And we pulled distributed patterns of activity from each of these 100 different brain regions. And we compared these voxel vectors of activity between these perceivers when they were thinking about this same target. And we then wanted to know whether or not the social relationship between these 2 perceivers, the strength of that social relationship, was somehow predictive of the degree of similarity in these brain representations when these 2 perceivers were thinking about the same target. And we did this using a linear mixed effects model, where we had the perceiver nested within their perspective group listed as a random effect in the model. But we weren't just interested in cases of target congruence or cases where 2 perceivers were thinking about the same person. We were also interested in the representations that these perceivers had of their group as a whole. So instead of just looking at an estimate of this perceiver thinking about one group member, we averaged the estimates that this perceiver had of each of their prospective group members and had a voxel vector that represented that group average. And we were comparing those group averages between perceivers and seeing whether or not the representation they had of their group as a whole was somehow similar. And again, wanted to know whether or not the strength of their social relationship was somehow predictive of the degree of similarity between those representations using this mixed linear effects model. And what we found was, in the case of target congruence, we found that the social relationship strength was significantly related to the degree of similarity in these distributed patterns of activity in regions that we know to be involved in social cognition. Most pronounced here, the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex and the anterior insula, which you can see are implicated in all 4 of these social relationship variables. So higher levels of friendship, higher levels of knowing and of liking and of perceived similarity were significantly associated with higher degrees of similarity between representations that these 2 perceivers had of the same target. And in the case of these group averages or these representations these perceivers had of their group as a whole, we also see that the social relationship strength is significantly related to higher levels of similarity between these representations in, again, the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex here for each of these social relationship variables. So higher levels of friendship and of knowing and of perceived similarity were associated with higher degrees of similarity in actual voxel-wise activity within these regions. And in this case, liking was not significant. And what this shows us is that we already know that these regions, the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex and the anterior insula, we know from previous studies that they're involved in social cognition and more importantly, in person perception and social structure learning. But what this is showing us is that the relationships that we have with the people in these small social networks that belong to are important, and that those social relationship measures are predictive of how similar our representations are among our group members of particular people or of our group as a whole.